Welcome to Automation Ladies, the only podcast we know of where girls talk about industrial automation.
With one of your hosts, Allie Gilpin. My update real quick is that I'm still working on OT Skatacon, which is in 55 days. But today I'm here with PJ McGrew, and he's going to talk to us about a strategy for workforce development that is sometimes overlooked or often overlooked. But before that, PJ, can you give us a little overview of, who you are, how you got where you are, and then we can talk about workforce development.
Certainly. Yeah. Thanks, Allie. Really appreciate being here and the time. My career journey is a long and winding one, and I had no idea that I would end up where I am today. So I was a college dropout. Back then I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, decided that's not what I wanted to do. Dropped out. Fortunately, I had invested wisely in the stock market as a young high school kid, taking half my paycheck when I was pushing carts at Walmart, and invested that. And so when I dropped out, I stupidly took all that out, bummed around for a few years, started substitute teaching, and decided that's what I really loved. And I was encouraged by my fiance at the time to go back to school, finished up, started teaching. I taught for about 10 years, both in Idaho and in Indiana, and then had an opportunity to leave the classroom, thought that I could have a broader impact on students across Indiana or across the country, I guess, at that point in time, than just the ones that I was teaching on a day in, day out basis. And I went to work for an assessment company and did that for a few years, started my own assessment company with a couple of my co-workers there. And then somehow I ended up working for the state government in Indiana for the State Board of Education. I was asked to testify on behalf of some alternate route teaching licenses. I never took an education class before I became a teacher. I was a math and philosophy major, and my wife's family was from Idaho. And so when we moved out there, they had a program that would allow me to take a pedagogy test, take a content area test, and get my teaching license. And so Indiana was going to do something similar. So I went before the State Board of Ed and testified. And before I dropped out, I had met one of the general counsel members at the State Board of Ed, or I guess the general counsel for the State Board of Ed. And she asked what I was doing and if I'd ever be interested in working for the state. So I did, and then turned that into an 8-year career at the state, working in education, workforce development, and ran the governor's workforce cabinet for 4 years before taking a break from the education and workforce space. Just did some government affairs work for a local nonprofit here in Indy. And then about a year and a half ago, this opportunity at Conexus Indiana arrived. They were looking for a senior vice president of talent strategy and programming. And I think once you get into that education and workforce space, you always kind of have that bug. And so I was itching to get back into it. And so jumped in. I was worried I didn't have any manufacturing experience in Conexus, Indiana. We are Advanced Manufacturing and Logistics Association that brings together both employers, the public sector, and the education system to be able to design solutions around manufacturing logistic needs. Our COO said, hey, look, our employers will tell us everything you need to know about manufacturing, but you know enough about the education workforce space, you won't have any problem doing this job. And it's been an exciting time, I think, the last year and a half on what we've built and where we're going.
That's great. So I read about the Swiss model for apprenticeships. Can you tell me about what that is?
Yeah, so the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation here in Indianapolis really embarked upon this journey dating back, I think, initially to 2018. I was working for the governor's workforce cabinet at the time. Local education entity from up in northern Indiana was wanting to take a trip over to Germany, one of their automotive manufacturers up there, Bentler Automotive. Their headquarters was in Germany. They do apprenticeship style there in Germany as well. And Claire Fidian Green, who's the president of the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation, had been doing a lot of research on Switzerland. And so she helped fund that initial trip over there. We spent, I think, 3 or 4 days in Germany and a couple of days in Switzerland, seeing their high school apprenticeship model in action. And we came back did some policy work to be able to enable that type of activity. And then in 2020, with the support of Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation, the Modern Apprenticeship Program launched a pilot in central Indiana, and then expanded out, spent the next couple of years expanding that out to where, I think they were operating at 9 different locations around the state. Back then, it really was a local intermediary bringing together employers and the educators to design kind of employer-specific training plans. And, I think in 2023, the Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation was looking at it, trying to figure out why we couldn't scale. Well, when you're designing these very specific employer training plans, the education system doesn't handle that very well, right? We kind of like standards for classes and all of those things. And so iLab Indiana was formed, and they took a trip over to Switzerland and participated in the CMETS Institute over there and said, well, your problem is you do not have industry talent associations coordinating with employers around an occupational standard. So they began taking employer delegations over to Switzerland, and in June of 2024, a group of about 30 manufacturing employees took a trip over there, saw the Swiss apprenticeship model in action, came back. The Richard M. Fairbanks Foundation asked, who in Indiana could help coordinate that work, and the employer said Conexus Indiana. And so they had posted that job position that I eventually ended up taking to help coordinate that activity. And so since I joined in December of 2024, really I'd been out of the education game for a couple of years, so trying to catch up on what had been done with the pilot since I had left state government. Indiana had just approved new diploma requirements in December of 2024, so trying to understand what that meant and how that could enable that activity. And so really those new diploma requirements are all about trying to get high school students some work-based learning or project-based learning experience while they're in high school, so that when they graduate, they really do have the applied skills to be able to do the things that they were learning in the theory of in the classroom, but weren't really putting it into practice. And so it's just really a really exciting time to be in the education and workforce space here. A lot of momentum around trying to get students those opportunities. And, the employers here are really starting to buy into the fact that they can have more influence on what is happening in the education space than what they had before through that industry talent association if we leverage it in the right way. So a lot of the work that we're doing now, right, it's been a year since I brought our employers together for the first time. In April 28th of 2025, I brought together about 20 employers and just sat down and we said, okay, how are we going to design and build out an educational program that fits your needs? We had employers of all shapes, sizes, representing every subsector of manufacturing in Indiana. I think everywhere from a 90-person shop to, we have Cummins and Caterpillar and all of those bigger employers around the table as well, Toyota. It really was amazing to see them come together and start to discuss common needs that they all had as we started to build this out.
So is that a 2-year program or a 4-year program? What does that look like?
So this initial program that we've built out is a 3-year program because of DOL, hazardous occupation laws, working with teenagers and all of those things. Our program is meant to start their students' junior year, so when they turn 16 and they can do a little bit more than what they could if they were hired at 15, and then progress along their junior, senior year, and then what would be their first year of post-secondary. Essentially, what we've built doesn't necessarily have to be done via apprenticeship, right? We are taking the occupational standard that we've built right now, and we are designing 6 brand new high school career and technical education courses so that it could scale to more than just those apprentices, right? So our thought process was, every student that's participating in a manufacturing program should be learning content designed by employers for what they need. And so we need to be updating the educational standards around those needs as well. So So regardless if we have an employer that just wants to offer a high school apprenticeship, that's great and good for them and good for the student. There's going to be way more ROI by hiring an apprentice and getting them where they need to be productive for you in that over that 3-year period. But, if you're a little skeptical of that, you just want to offer maybe a project to the school based upon some need that you have within your facility, we can facilitate those types of conversations as well. But we've looked at what our employers have told us they need and what we are currently offering. So we have 10 different manufacturing, career, and technical education pathways in Indiana right now. And that's way too many. Schools don't know what to offer. Students don't know what to enroll in. And so I think what we've built, we can consolidate those pathways from 10 at least down to 5. Because 80% of the educational content in those 5 pathways is within those 6 courses that our employers have helped us build out now.
Tell me more about location. You're in Indiana, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And so this program is in Indiana. How many students do you have participating in this? Or have you started putting students in this?
We will start next school year. So we just ratified our occupational standard at our April meeting. I was a staff of 1 for about a year doing this work. And so it took me about a year to figure out how we could design and build this out. Listening to the employers, going through all the KSAs that they wanted, and then packaging them in ways that made sense, right? So with my curriculum and assessment design background, I could listen to the employers around what they want, what they need, and then figure out how to package those things together. So we will launch a pilot next year. I think we have 8 of our employers that are a part of our 24-member steering committee that are going to offer apprenticeship slots next year. I think we'll have between 10 and 15 apprentices next year. And then 27, 28 is when we're really hoping to scale. So the 6 brand new career and tech ed courses that we're building out right now, we will launch in 27, 28. And so through enrollments in those classes, we'll be able to deliver the content that the employers want to students, as well as, any of the employers that want to offer an apprenticeship, we'll be able to connect them in and know that the students will be learning the same content that they have already signed off on.
That's great. What about if you're not 16 years old? Is there a way to get into the program if you're older?
Yeah, so there are certainly ways to get into the program if you're older, and that's one of the nice things about what we've built is it doesn't have to be just within the high school space. So we are actively partnering with post-secondary institutions across Indiana as well, providing them feedback on what we're hearing from employers, and that's kind of forcing them to also rethink some of the things that they have done or have built already from their degree programs, short-term programs, and all of those things in between. We are currently working with Ivy Tech Community College. It's the largest singly accredited community college system in the country. And working with them on some short course development. We know for incumbent workers or career changers that have families at home, they don't have time necessarily to sit in an associate degree 2-year program or maybe even a semester-long program. So how do we start to condense some of the learning that we could provide for them to transition to manufacturing in these shorter, quicker, bite-sized chunks? And so just last week, we brought together a group of about 20 employers with Ivy Tech on 2 different 30-hour courses that we built around manufacturing principles classes designed for career changers or high school graduates that never participated in manufacturing. So we're doing those things as well. And then the polymechanic or advanced manufacturing technician occupational standard that we've built, talking with Ivy Tech about some of their degree programs and how they too, just like we're looking at the high school space, consolidating pathways down, how could they consolidate some of their degrees around some of those same principles and concepts that employers have outlined, getting a little bit broader from a foundational perspective at the very beginning and onset of a student's journey, whether that's a high school student or an adult that's just going to a community college for the first time, and then letting them kind of specialize from there. So we've developed this kind of, we're calling it the Core 14, simply because it's a decent play on words here in Indiana, because we used to have the Core 40 diploma. So it's kind of aligned to some things that folks already know here. But those kind of the 14 modules that we've built out here provide a really good, strong foundational base for modern manufacturing. Covering everything from it's a cross-functional technician, essentially. So learning about CNC, learning about automation, robotics, PLCs, all of those things as your foundational core, and then letting students decide whether, hey, do I want to be a maintenance tech, or do I want to be a CNC machinist? Do I want to go into quality and design after they have that foundation, rather than the way that, we typically design educational pathways in a siloed manner around a specific occupation. For instance, our current precision machining program starts students off with precision machining. It doesn't give them any understanding of what manufacturing is or what a manufacturing environment looks like, how that role, their specific role in manufacturing could, impact the entire company. And so we're really excited about this. I think just knowing and hearing from the employers that this is what they're looking for, and then being able to inject that in the education system.
Awesome. What do you find the most rewarding about working in education?
Really, the student impact, right? I mean, I still miss the classroom. I'll go visit classrooms and be like, gosh, I really miss teaching. So seeing that light bulb come on for the students when they actually connect learning with things that they're passionate about, that's probably what gets me most excited. I think most exciting about this work is figuring out, what employers want and what they need in their manufacturing environments, and how that can translate back into the classroom for students in ways that we're not currently providing. So being able to have that impact that I think will better prepare students to where they don't have to be retrained now when they first go into a manufacturing facility. They have the skills they need, and they can be productive right away. So I think from a student, an employer, and a broader Indiana economic impact perspective, that's, I think, what really excites me about the work.
So if you're a manufacturer, what do you have to say to them to, I guess, kind of nudge them in the direction of using high school students?
Yeah, that is a question that comes up quite a bit. I think it's really about your pipeline development and where you can find people. We have to do a better job of creating early awareness about manufacturing, just generally, right? Manufacturing is not, I think when I was a kid growing up, my parents were like, you're going to go to college, you're going to have, white collar job and all of those things, because my dad was an electrician, my grandpa was a mason. And, they didn't want us to have to do manual labor and all of those things. But manufacturing isn't what it was, I think, when my dad first started working, or my grandpa first started working, right? It's you go into these facilities, they're clean, there's robots everywhere. And I think, once students kind of see that and how tech enabled a lot of it is, I think that can excite students, but I just don't know that they recognize what oftentimes is right in their backyard. And so trying to convince employers to open up their facilities, to have students and their families come in, see what it's about, and just starting small, starting where you can, right? You might only be able to partner with your school and come in and give a presentation to a CTE class. Or you might be able to offer an internship opportunity, or maybe you're ready to jump right into an apprenticeship, but let's start small. Let's start with one or two and then grow from there, because it is going to take a lot more work than what you might think it would at the very beginning. But then once you get a process up and running, then you can really scale from there. I think it takes a champion probably at the C-suite level to say, hey, this is something that we're going to get on board with. But then it also takes, a willing supervisor who might not have worked with a 16 or 17-year-old kid before, might not understand this generation of students. So we're going through and we're developing some supervisor training to make sure that they have those skills. to do that. But then you also need to mentor that student through the process. And that mentor could be the same person as the supervisor, or maybe somebody that's just working alongside them that might have a passion for youth development. So there are all of these steps that you have to take to be able to do that. And we are slowly but surely, I think, getting more and more employers on board with that. I think especially because, one thing, our population isn't necessarily growing in Indiana. It's been pretty stagnant, one. And two, when you look at the current manufacturing workforce in Indiana, over 25% of those individuals are 55 or older. So we are really going to have to think about new ways of bringing folks into facilities. And one of those is, hey, let's start younger with high school students, and let's flip the model a little bit, right? I mean, we've in America for a long time now, it's, you go through high school, you go through college, and then you get a job. I think one of the nice things that I've seen over in Switzerland, so I've had the opportunity to go over there 3 times now, and they start apprenticeship. They start working. About 67% of their students start in high school with an apprenticeship opportunity. They figure out what they want to do. They, get locked in with an employer, and then that employer, based upon how the students performed and what their needs are, they'll send that student back to post-secondary. So, over 2/3 of those students that start an apprenticeship end up back in secondary or end up in post-secondary. But it's a little bit different mindset than what we think about over here. Here it's school first and then work. And there it's school integrated with work and then some additional schooling on top of that.
I'm a millennial, and growing up, I was told, you don't want to go to trade school. You need to go to college. And I think that that had to do with, the skills gap that we have today. You said that, a large percentage of the people in manufacturing are 55 or older. Do you think we're finally changing that? And where do you change that? I guess the high school students, and showing high school students, is where you start to show people that that's not true and that they can make a good living in trades. And now it's almost like there's a hybrid. It's a hybrid of a trades job and you need to be educated job. I'm a controls engineer myself, and I had to learn a lot of, getting my own tools. And that's not something that college was going to teach me. They taught me engineering principles. And so when I was out in school, I felt useless for the first couple of years, because all I learned was theory and nothing that I had, all the experience that I have today and that makes me, worth the amount of money that I'm worth is because of the experience and actually putting my hands on stuff in the industry, not all of the, all the college that I took. When we were all told to take college, but now we have this giant skills gap. Do you think that attitude is finally changing?
I do. I think it is changing, and I think that it's really how we define a good job, right? And I think for a long time, right, and I think I've already talked about my parents. I think they were somewhat guilty of this too, right? All of my siblings, they pushed traditional 4-year post-secondary, and because they felt like, hey, if you have a college degree, that automatically equates to a good job. I think we understand nowadays that's not necessarily the case, and there are multiple paths to a good job. And for something like manufacturing, and unless you are pairing the theoretical with the applied, and whether that's a simulated lab environment or through actual structured OJT, you're not going to necessarily have all the skills that you need when you go to work on day one, right? And so it's this blurring of the lines between the, traditional classroom theoretical approach and applying those skills in a real way while you're in somewhat of a safe environment before you actually start your job, your full-time job, after you finish school.
What can you say to high school students if you're trying to sell them manufacturing?
I think it's about the opportunity, right? And I won't forget this probably ever from our very first meeting in April of last year with our employers. I assumed that because production roles are high need all of the time. I thought that was where our employers would automatically jump to and what they wanted to look at when we built out this first occupational standard. And one of our employers, he said, PJ, we don't want to train high school students for a particular job in manufacturing. We need them to understand that you can build a career in manufacturing. And I think we have to do much more of that, right? Show them that career progression that you can have in manufacturing, that it'll lead to really good economic opportunity for your family. There's always going to be a job in manufacturing. I know, even with, as we become more tech enabled and automation increases across facilities, jobs are going to change, right? And your job, that production job might get a little bit easier, but the jobs are still going to be there. They just might look different than they do today, or they did yesterday. And so I think we have to do a better job. I think it's one of the things that we have on our agenda over the next year is what does that look like? Whether it's, more K-8 awareness just around STEM and giving students projects focused on specific roles or jobs, so that they can, learn about more of those things. Getting folks into classrooms, right? Just earlier this month, we had our Rising 30 celebration. So we have employers all around the state nominate folks that are 30 or under that are, making a huge impact within their manufacturing environment. So how do we leverage those Rising 30 students to be able to go out and talk to high school students about careers in manufacturing so they can see, hey, look, even as a young person here, I'm having this type of impact within my facility. So we have to scale that. We have to create more awareness. We only had last year about 4% of our career and technical education enrollments in a manufacturing pathway. And when manufacturing and logistics account for 35% of Indiana's workforce, that pipeline just isn't there, right? And so I think we have to show young people that you can have a meaningful career in manufacturing, right? There's advancement opportunities, economic mobility, and it's becoming increasingly tech-enabled, which I think excites young people as well.
If you're a manufacturer, how do you even start? Let's say you're not Indiana, and you can't necessarily come to you. How would you recommend? Do they need to go to like the colleges and start working that way?
That could be one approach. I would probably start with your manufacturing association, your statewide association, and say, hey, look, let's flip the script, right? Because right now, the way that, educational pathways are traditionally built, right? You have a post-secondary, say community college system that they will look at, job postings data, lagging labor market information data, and start to build out pathways really around bad data, right? And bad information. We know employers don't traditionally always update job postings to demonstrate what skills they need, especially with some of these tech-enabled roles. We just met with a group of employers last week, we haven't updated those job descriptions in 10 or 15 years. Does anybody even look at those? It's well, yes. Some of your community colleges will use those to build out programs. And so flip the script. Instead of the education system designing programs, bring together a group of employers, identify their common needs, build out a pathway, and then try to revise and reform the education system around what the employer has built. And that's, I think, so going back 6 years now at this point, where I really kind of messed up. I don't know that I messed up. I think it was needed at the time. So I was running the governor's workforce cabinet, which was our state workforce board, and I was also the state CTE director here in Indiana. Our high school CTE oversight was at our Department of Education. Our post-secondary career and tech ed oversight was at our Department of Workforce Development. two entities that had a hard time talking together. And they were kind of disconnected. And so I said, look, we're going to bring those underneath one roof. We're going to put them here at the workforce cabinet. We're going to redesign this system. And we had kind of a certificate program, workforce ready grant program that Governor Holcomb had instituted, where we would pay for 1 year of post-secondary for folks, get them their 1 year certificate. They could go on and get a job, or they could continue on to finish out their degree if they wanted to. And we backward built from those 1 year programs that we looked at wage data, we looked at occupational demand data, and decided what we were going to fund there. So we took those programs and we just backward built them into the high school space. Because at the time we had something like our introduction to welding class mapped to 9 different post-secondary classes at one community college. I said, how can one class map to 9 different classes? It doesn't make any sense. So we backward built. So now our high school programs are essentially the first year of post-secondary. But because there were so many of those things that we were funding, right, that's what led us to having 70 different high school career and technical education pathways across all of our industry sectors. And that's just way too many for schools, for employers. And so now I think this model where we're not just listening to education on what they've built, but we're really listening to employers around their needs and what they want built is a much better model. And we're able to get, I think new skills that are coming around much injected into the system much quicker than the typical approach to, standard development, at least in the K-12 realm here in Indiana. Those standards hadn't been looked at in over 10 years before I redesigned the next level programs of study in 2020.
Are you doing anything with programs that include AI?
So, yeah, that is a topic, as you know, it comes up in just about every conversation every day. And so one of the nice things, so when we started down this journey of looking at building out the polymechanic pathway that we now have, we started with what Switzerland had already developed, right? So our group of employers had gone over there, they'd seen it in action, and they said, look, they have this cross-functional technician. This is where we really want to start. So we took their training plan. I put it in front of the employers. I said, okay, evaluate these knowledge, skills, and abilities that they've identified. Tell me what works in our context here in Indiana, what doesn't, what gaps exist, and all of those things. And the consistent message that we heard, really, we began this work, I think it was in late May, early June of last year, and ran through December, was that there just weren't enough digital skills being built out within the KSAs that Switzerland was using. And it made a lot of sense because the polymechanic training plan that we were looking at was built and designed in 2015 and 2016. And there's been a lot of technological change, in the last 10 years. And so we have this digital skills thread that cuts across all of our modules that we now have built out within this polymechanic pathway to account for that. I wouldn't say we've necessarily focused on AI specifically within that. It is a component. But, one of the things that we've been hearing from employers recently around, wanting to utilize AI for, some of their frontline workers and some other things is that they don't necessarily have the language skills to be able to interact with AI and write good prompts and all of those things. And so we're actually talking with Ivy Tech right now about the potential to, do we need an ELA remedial course paired with some prompt writing to be able to get out there, one of those short course, does it even need to be 30 hours? Could it be a little bit shorter than that even? So we're hoping to dig in on that a little bit more and maybe be able to launch something there by the end of this year. But I will say AI is one of our, I'll say digital adoption is one of our big key focus areas at Conexus. So we have two main pillars that we focus on to help the AML industry. One is obviously talent and workforce. And the other one is overcoming barriers to digital adoption. And so just this year, we've launched our digital adoption barrier workshop series. We just had our second workshop last week where we had, I think it was about 75 employers attend, just working with them on overcoming some of those barriers. How do you convince your C-suite to make that investment? Who owns that? How do you start and then create a sustainability plan just to continue to add more and more within your facility? And so that's gone over really well. And we had been running a program that the state is not funding any longer, but our manufacturing readiness grant program that we launched at the state, I think in 2019, and then Conexus managed on behalf of the state. We were able to support, about 750 small, mid-sized manufacturers do something in that digital adoption arena. And so we have some really rich data around those projects. And so we're taking those projects now and creating kind of an AI conductor tool that would allow manufacturers to search on projects that have already been funded by the state and just to see the results of those things. We've done a lot of case studies to highlight success stories there as well. And so trying to do more and more in that arena where talent and technology kind of merge together.
You've spent a lot of time talking to manufacturers. What are they looking for that, isn't necessarily, there? I guess what's the gap that they're looking for in these high school students that you're trying to develop the most?
I think the couple of things that come up, again and again, adaptability is one thing that comes up, obviously, and it's no surprise to you, like just the professional skills. How do we do more of that? Which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about, Indiana's new diploma, because one of those ways to ensure that students are developing those professional skills is through some type of work experience, and we can get that through work-based learning. We only have, I believe, and these numbers are going to be a little bit old, so the percentages might not hold today as they did a couple of years ago. But I think we only had about 10 to 20% of students 14 to 18 that were working in Indiana now. And so, 20 years ago, that number was much, much higher. And so the professional skills that were being developed through work in those younger students just don't exist today because students aren't working like they used to. And so through work-based learning, project-based learning, I think we can start to develop some of those teamwork skills that employers are looking for, some of those adaptability skills. And then troubleshooting is probably the one that comes up more often than not. And so really making sure we have in the courses that we're building out right now, multiple units around troubleshooting for students to be able to make sure that they are learning those skills as well.
If people are interested in talking to you, how do they get a hold of you?
So there's we have an AML Industry Talent Association webpage on our website. It's got my team and my contact info on there. There's also a form that they could fill out if they're interested in learning more. Folks can always reach out to me via email. I've been connecting with some folks all around the country. We're starting to see this Industry Talent Association model grow. There are a group of other states, probably about 10 states, that are looking at doing something similar to what we're doing in Indiana. I know Colorado has stood up a manufacturing industry talent association as well. So I've been in communication with the lead there just to share lessons learned over the past year. I think they just launched in December. And so I was really able to provide her with some insights to hopefully get them going a little bit faster than what it took me. Because I do think listening to employers, bringing them together, it creates a replicable process, right? We might see different skills across states, but I think, inevitably a lot of it is going to be the same if we just bring employers together and listen to them. So I'm hoping that this talent association model can scale to other areas.
It certainly sounds like it will be able to scale. I'm excited to hear about how it works out.
Yeah, it's really then a matter of, I think, then convincing the education system that they need to change what they're doing a little bit to listen to the employers on the front end as they go through the design process, rather than, they'll build something and then get kind of a tacit validation from a advisory board that might have a couple of manufacturers on it, but it also has somebody from the tech industry and somebody from ag, right? Those advisory boards tend to be more cross-sector advisory boards than just looking at a single industry sector. And so, but we'll start to see, I think, right, some overlap in skills that we see, as technology continues to evolve and impact all the sectors that we have. We'll see some more, I think, cross-functional skills to make it easier for people to transition from one job or one industry into another, right? I think tech is a prime example of that right now, right? I mean, everybody's going to need AI, and then everybody's going to be worried about cybersecurity. So as these tech firms might be laying off folks, I think it's a prime opportunity for some of them then to transition over into manufacturing or some of these other sectors that are trying to, integrate their facilities more in a tech-enabled way.
Well, this was a really interesting conversation. Thank you
for listening to Automation Ladies. If you like our content and you want to stay in touch, please connect with us on LinkedIn, follow the show page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can send us a message or a coffee on our website, automationladies.io. We look forward to getting to know you. By Samuel James.